Okay, this video is paintings of the saints now from this book, The Best Christian Art by me, Pete Rogers. This is part 3, Paintings of the Saints. We're just doing about 10 pages a day. We'll start out here with Joan of Arc. This is the Joan of Arc movie starring Ingrid Bergman. And this is figure 1117. For anybody following along in the book by page, we're on page 342. So she was a great actress, and that's a very heroic story, the story of Joan of Arc. Okay, this next painting is Saint Columba. Saint Columba was also called Saint Columcille, and he is from Ireland. And he did a lot of heroic things. He's not only a brave guy, he was a bit of a knight before his religious stuff, but he started a bunch of monasteries, and he also was part of the group that led to the publication of the Book of Kells. It's a highly illustrated version of the Bible. And the Irish were famous. There's a great book by Thomas Cahill called How the Irish Saved Civilization, with regard to the Irish monks, made copies of all the great books of, ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans and the Bible, so these things didn't get lost after Rome had been sacked in 476 AD, and things got kind of bleak for a while there in the Middle Ages, so to speak. So anyways, that's St. Columba, also known as St. Columcille of Ireland, who led to the publication of the Book of Kells. Okay, this right here is St. Louis. Let me see if I can get him on the picture a little better. Visiting the Sick, this painting by Ari Scheffer in 1822. And, France, man, used to be great for Catholicism. They used to have the papacy there for quite a while, actually. France builds the best cathedrals. That's kind of fantastic. So here's St. Louis visiting the sick, a nice painting. Okay, here's a painting of St. John of God. Remember that, John of God, saving the sick from a fire in 1549, painting by Manuel Gonzalez. And so there was a guy out in South America who called himself John of God, and he actually had really good clinical results for helping cancer patients. But anyways, this of course reminds one of the painting of Aeneas carrying his father Anchises out of Troy when Troy was burning. Excuse me. And this is Cardinal St. John Henry Newman, and he was the leader of the Tractarian movement in England during the Victorian Renaissance and the Catholic Revival. And he was a very good writer. This is one of a sort of a hymn that he wrote. I got to scroll it up though to get to the words here. God has created me to do him some definite service. I shall do good. I shall do his work. I shall be a preacher of truth. Lead kindly light amid the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home. Lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see the distant scene. One step is enough for me. And that's pretty accurate for what we're going through now. The encircling doom. We see big money wanting to destroy Christianity, want to what side, all the Christians. And so we can just, try to lead a good life and be good, and hopefully things will turn out okay for us. Right now, things are bleak, but hopefully they're going to get better. We'll see. Okay, so that's going to be it for the chapter on paintings of the saints. And we'll go ahead and start the paintings from the Reformation, Counter-Reformation, and Baroque eras. And actually, I should have put it on there. This also includes paintings from the time of the Renaissance. Such an obvious thing. I'm surprised I didn't put it on there. Okay, so the first painting is Christopher Columbus going before the Spanish king and queen by Emmanuel Lutza. He's the same guy who wrote the great painting, who made the great painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. Okay, this painting is from 1843, and obviously it's a beautiful painting. There's Christopher Columbus before the king and queen of Spain, begging them to fund his journey. Turned out to be one of the most amazing journeys and profitable things that Spain ever did. Okay, here's a painting from the Medici studio, and this is Lorenzo de' Medici with Michelangelo. And so the young Michelangelo has just made a bust of like a fawn's head. And it's rather beautiful. And Lorenzo the Magnificent was a big funder of the arts. They had found Michelangelo, who's just, he's the greatest artist who ever lived. And so they, let him live in their home and studio and helped him to develop his talents. He's around all these other great artists and scholars, so he can learn a lot faster. It's a great opportunity. And here's another great artist. This is the young Titian. He was from Venice, painting by William Dyce, 1857. Became another superstar artist. Now, Michelangelo was very conceited. Michelangelo said, Titian would have been a better painter if he'd learned how to draw first. And that was kind of like a typical stuck-up thing Michelangelo would say. But it's a very nice painting. The Venetians were especially known for their skill with color. They were made a lot of clothing with all the different dyes, and they were good at using all these different colors in their paintings. Characteristic feature of Venetian painting. Okay, this next painting is Reception at the Court of Versailles by Jean-Léon Gérôme, 1878, and it's a rather magnificent painting. You can see how impressive it is. There's the king at the top of the stairs and all the court, the people assembled. Jean-Léon Gérôme was a great painter, did a lot of good stuff. Here's a painting of scenes from the Decameron by Salvatore Postiglione from 1906. Very nice. They're all telling their stories, part of the early steps in the Renaissance. The Renaissance also was from the early work of Petrarch as well. And of course, Dante and Aquinas, all that stuff was leading up to it. And here's one of the big superstars of the Italian Renaissance, Cosimo Medici, by Jacopo Pontormo, 1550. So basically, Cosimo, they felt in Italy that to loan money was a little bit of a sin, usury, and they tried to make up for it by donating lots and lots of money to charity and funding for schools, for churches, for artists to make paintings, for scholars to translate books from the ancient Greek and Latin. So, a beautiful painting there of Cosimo Medici, one of the great heroes of funding the Renaissance. And here's another great heroes of the Renaissance. So this right here is Pope Julius. And Pope Julius was a real tough old guy, and he was one of my favorite popes. And yeah, he had a mistress, and yes, he had some children. So what? And you're going to get a lot better priests, bishops, and cardinals if you allow married guys, because most men really like women a lot. We can't help it, okay? So anyways, he's a tough old guy. He fought as a warrior, and he basically commissioned the greatest art in the history of the world. He commissioned Michelangelo here. This is Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel and to make other paintings. He commissioned Raphael to make other magnificent paintings like the School of Athens. Bramante is working with him on making a new St. Peter's Basilica there in Rome in the Vatican. And it ended up that Raphael helped out with the design of St. Peter's Basilica, as did Michelangelo. Michelangelo a lot with the dome, and it was extraordinary. So Pope Julius left some of the most greatest lasting landmarks of art ever in the history of the world, and I think that's a pretty useful use of church money, because people would criticize the church about indulgences and other sources of money. He used that to defend the Vatican, defend Rome from invaders of Italy. He used that to make the greatest paintings, greatest art ever in the history of the world, the standards of art for all time. So I think that's pretty productive work for a pope. So that's where we're going to leave it for today. Hope that was interesting and helpful.